Welcome to the newest episode of Beyond the Fame with Jason Fraley. I'm your host, Jason Fraley, picking the brains of the top filmmakers, musicians, and artists of our time. Crash Test Dummies rocked City Winery in Washington, D.C. next week. I spoke to co-vocalist Ellen Reid about the band's unique sound from to the Ballad of Peter Pumpkinhead. Hey, Ellen Reid, thanks so much for joining us on WTOP.
Oh, my pleasure.
And we're talking with Ellen Reid of the Crash Test Dummies, who's been the co-vocalist since the very beginning. The band's coming to City Winery on March 15th. Tell us about this tour. I guess it's hard to believe, celebrating, I guess, last year was 30 years. Is that right?
I think it's really 32 at this point. It's been a while.
Well, yeah, because that first album was 91, but yeah, of course you formed before that. So yeah, we're probably 32 years at this point. Wow. Could you have ever imagined the band would still be going this long after?
Of course not. I kind of thought it was just going to be a way to help pay my hydro bill as I was going through university. So this has been, I still pinch myself.
Absolutely. Well, to remind our listeners sort of the journey. I know you were born in Manitoba, Canada. What before you met Brad Roberts and the gang, tell me about growing up. Like, what music were you into as a kid?
Well, when you're little, you generally listen to the music that your parents listen to. So I listened to a lot of folk music and classical music. That was their sort of what they were into. But as I got older, I don't think I was particularly unique. I liked the bands that people were into. I liked rock bands. I was a big Aerosmith fan for a long time. But then as I got older, I got back to folk music and more roots music. So kind of came full circle.
Gotcha. So then the all-important meeting, Brad Roberts and his bro, how did you actually meet them? I know the original band was like the St. James Rhythm Pigs or something, but how did you meet? How did you run into those guys?
Well, I met Brad at the University of Winnipeg, and at the time he had this little group that he had together that were playing at an after-hours club in Winnipeg called the Blue Note, and he was looking for a keyboard player just to play on a few songs, and a mutual friend introduced us, and so I just got up and played a few songs with him, and it just sort of went from there. I didn't even sing for I think the first full year of playing in that band, so it was just through mutual friends and a lot of luck, really.
So you were in the band back even when it was St. James Rhythm Pigs. Then you were.
I think it was 1986.
Wow.
Yeah, I was 1 year old.
Exactly. Well done. Well, so how did it involve to become to change the name into Crash Test Dummies? I know, gosh, I remember growing up in the 80s, there was all those, PSA commercials with the Crash Test Dummies. Did that inspire the name at all, or where'd it come from?
Well, it actually came from a medical student friend of Brad's who he was, as I say, in medical school, and he had been watching crash test simulations all day long, and he suggested that one. He had also suggested the oxymorons, which was one that I kind of wanted. I had sort of been leaning towards the oxymorons, but Crash Test Dummies won out, and I guess we're stuck with it.
Well, you would have been the oxy, they would have been the morons, right?
Well, yeah, sure. Let's say that.
Yeah, if Brad was on here, he'd probably say the opposite. But you have the microphone. That's really cool. So wait, I'm curious now because gosh, my wife and I have been listening to in prep for this interview. She was like, when I mentioned it, she was like, "Oh my God, my dad bought that album. We played it all the time. We've been listening to it over and over again." Did Brad Roberts have that deep baritone voice from the start, or was that something he sort of sculpted when Crash Test took off?
No, he's always been a bass baritone, and I think when we were first starting out, he kind of struggled with that because all of his musical idols had higher voices and could do those sort of heavy metal high screams and stuff, and he struggled with that. But then eventually he started writing material for his range, and I think he did a lot better for that. So he struggled at first.
So you said his idols were the higher pitch. Like, what are we talking about? Like Robert Plant, that kind of stuff?
Well, like he liked what was he into? He was into like Kiss. I mean, most male vocalists at the time had a higher range than Brad. It's he's kind of at the lower end of the pop the pop
Right.
genre. But yeah, he liked Alice Cooper and Kiss and country musicians. There weren't a lot of bass baritone singers out there, so he didn't really have anyone that he could sort of emulate. So he had to write music for himself that was in his range.
Right. I guess you didn't get your Randy Travis's and stuff until after that. So yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. So, but he doesn't speak like that, right? He's not like, hey, do you want to form a band? Like he doesn't talk like that.
He has a very low voice. He has
Oh,
he's not putting it on. He does have a very low voice.
so it's just organically comes. That's nice. That's awesome.
That's
Well,
just who he is.
okay, great. So, all right. So then, obviously, then that first album, man, it's called "The Ghosts That Haunt Me," 1991. Obviously, you're there singing, harmonizing, singing the co-vocals and everything. Um, take me into that song particularly. That is such a powerful song. I know Brad wrote that one, I guess, but it's sort of like letting go of your past demons and coming into a new form of yourself. Like, just talk about what makes that song "The Ghosts That Haunt Me" so powerful.
Um, well, I don't know. I think it really depends on the listener. Everyone has a different interpretation of what the songs mean. I mean, for me, it's more like when you meet someone and they accept you for who you are, you can let go of all these things that have been haunting you. You're so kind, I know you would not mind to send away the ghosts that haunt me now. So I think it's about being accepted for who you are, warts and all. But to be honest, you'd have to ask Brad what he was talking about.
Right, exactly. But I'm sure you'll be able to provide at least some juicy tidbits on the recordings of some of these ones, I'm sure.
Oh, well, the recording, I was there. The writing of
Yeah,
the song, I wasn't, I wrote my own parts, but I
sure.
didn't write the music or the lyrics. So when we recorded that song in Winnipeg in 1990, good God, you know, we recorded that whole record in 10 days. And Brad had a horrible bronchial infection for the whole thing, and it was our first record, and we were very green. So yeah, it was a good experience. But for what that song means, that one song means, I think I'll say it again. I think it really depends on the listener and what it means to each individual.
Well, I think your summary of it was pretty spot on. But yeah, that's the beauty of music. Everybody will take something from it. And I know the other one, just the other real quick on that first album, Superman song was huge, especially in Canada. Why do you think that took off? It was sort of like it was like Superman and Tarzan. One was, I guess, sort of like I don't know, like a political liberal activist. Tarzan was like a laissez-faire capitalist. Like, I mean, that's some deep stuff. But why do you think it took off so much, especially in Canada?
Um, I really don't know why a song will or won't take become successful in any market in particular. It really just depends on the state of radio and how much support you have behind it. But I think it's a song about the underdog and the behind the scenes people that make things happen. Superman didn't get a lot of, he didn't make money for what he was doing, but he did it because he cared about his community and his society. Whereas Tarzan was just, in this particular telling of it, was just, pounding his chest and making a fuss.
Gotcha. It's a clever juxtaposition. Well, very cool. So at that point, you're huge in Canada. You're winning, Group of the Year at the Juno Awards, which is, I guess, sort of like a Canadian style Grammys kind of a deal. But then the second album is when Crash Test Dummies blows up, obviously, like worldwide famous. God Shuffled His Feet in '93, I guess. Man, that album, I mean, I feel like everyone had that album when it came out. I mean, that title, take me into sort of the recording of that title track, because again, I mean, the lyrics, obviously, Brad, again, I'd have to ask them about God resting on the seventh day, people gathering to ask him questions, all that stuff. But just any stories you can share from the recording side of that?
Well, we recorded in Lake Geneva, Wisconsin, and we had a lot more support behind us from the record company because of the success of the first record. And Brad was very much hands-on in the recording of this record. He spent hours and days searching for sounds that he wanted to create the sound that he wanted for that record. He really did a huge amount of the production on that record. I would say the majority. So he worked very hard, and there's nothing by accident on that record. But the recording of that song, there are so many tracks. There are 20 tracks of background vocals alone. So that tells you a little bit about the depth that we sort of went into creating the sound of that record, and especially that one track. The guitar solo, the Adrian Belew guitar solo, I think that was at least 10 tracks that were mixed together by Tom Lord Alge. He really crafted that album into something very magical, I think. So yeah, that album was there. Nothing was by accident on that album. It was very, very plotted out, and not in an overproduced way, I don't think, but more in a very deliberate way, and just to create the sound that we wanted to make. So it was more like finishing a puzzle than coloring. Just being. I don't know how to put it, but it was very well crafted, I think.
Right, very, very. And how many? You said 20 tracks throughout the whole on the album, stacked.
No, 20 tracks just on God Shuffled His Feet, on that one song.
Just on the one song, 20 tracks.
20 tracks.
I'm trying to paint a visual picture for the radio, or podcast. So yeah, listeners, if you can imagine, your iMovie, or what I mean, your Garage Band, whatever software people have, imagine 20 tracks stacked up on top of each other. That's incredible.
Yeah, and that's just
for one song.
Yeah, just for one song.
That's just God shuffling his feet. Wow.
Yeah.
That's incredible. All right, cool. Well, then, I'm going to have to ask you about the hit single off the real big famous one off of that was, I don't even know how to say it. I guess.
That's right. That's
but that thing, it's funny. It's always funny to me when sometimes there's a song that's like, it becomes a hit. People can sort of sing along to it, but they're not really even remembering what, it's so famous for them on the radio and in their album. But then when you really look at the lyrics, it's some deep stuff. Child suffering, and the hair changing pigment went through after a tragic event, or birthmarks, or the kids getting pulled out of school for the church speaking in tongues. Like there's some deep stuff in that song. Why do you think it works so well? I ask again.
Well, I think internationally, I think ultimately it works because it's just a good song, and melodically I think it's beautiful. Lyrically, I think, because it's easy to go in English as in German as in French, like it everyone could hum along to that song, and it wasn't like anything else that you were hearing on the radio at the time, but in that same token, in the same breath, nothing was of radio was a lot more free then. It was alternative, right? Everyone was looking for something very different, and we were very fortunate that we were becoming popular during the time that alternative music was becoming more popular. But why that song became so popular, at first the album wasn't doing that great in Canada. With that single, like the record company was a little concerned, and then it was a few radio stations in America that broke the album based on that song. I think Atlanta was the first market to really pick that song and make it into a story. So it was really why that song became popular is just because a couple of radio stations just liked it and played the crap out of it, and so it created a story for other radio stations to follow.
Yeah, and I think you nailed it when you said that it's just the idea of humming is universal. That's universal language, no matter what country you're listening to. Absolutely right.
Sure.
And if you'll permit me one more deep dive into that album, because I'm sure there's a million other albums we could talk about, but that one, I've so many people have listened to it so many times, but there's so many like existential, like deep songs on that. Like Afternoons and Coffee Spoons was like sounded like fear of getting old, and that's your life in a nursing home or whatever. The Psychic was Man, it's like if in that case, it's like, would this psychic keep it a secret if she knew I was gonna die? Like, there's some deep stuff. And then two nights in a maiden, you get eaten by the tigers after frolicking. But like, man, I mean, do you have a particular favorite of so let's call those like sort of deeper cuts on that album? Is there one that sort of deals with those sort of existential themes that maybe wasn't one of the hit radio songs, but ones that is one of the deeper ones later in the album that really speaks to you?
Um, yeah, Brad has a very specific viewpoint on life. He has a very particular way of looking at the world, and that does come through in all of his lyrics. And he has a lot of questions. He's an English philosophy student in his whole life, so he always asks the big questions. Not a lot of Moon Spoon June for Brad, but as far as my favorite track on that record, God. I like Swimming in Your Ocean. It was a single. I don't think it was a single in the States. It was a single in Canada, but musically, I love that song. I don't know. I guess Swimming in Your Ocean would be my favorite on that record.
There you go. That's her pick. All right, cool. Well, then, and I won't go as deep dive into all the albums, but just take me, more of a bigger picture as you move forward after that massive success of that album. Talk about sort of how the band's sound sort of evolved, because I know like A Worm's Life, the next album was a much harder sound, and then after that you get into like some electronic kind of funk stuff, and but I know your voice takes an even more prominent position, and it's almost like it sounds like a female lead singer on some of those songs as we're getting into like the mid 90s, as opposed to the deep baritone of Brad stuff in the early 90s. How did that transition sort of happen? Like, how did you become to the forefront there a little bit on some of those?
I think Brad's always been very conscious of not wanting to present the same record twice. He doesn't, not just because he wants to give the listener something different, but because it's boring to write the same record or the same music over and over again. And so bringing my voice more into the fore was just a way of breaking up the bass baritone thing and showing that we had a little bit more stylistic range. So yeah, I think it's more of just not wanting to do the same thing twice.
Right. That makes sense. And did it sort of parallel and reflect the times a little too? Because, you think the early 90s, you think of that grunge sound, which would have fit Brad's baritone voice a little more. And then around mid 90s, you're starting to get Cranberries and that kind of stuff, and your voice becomes prominent. Did you think it reflected the times a little too?
I don't think it was a conscious decision. I really don't think it was a conscious decision. I mean, I started singing leads on Peter Pumpkinhead, and that was just because they want the people who were doing Dumb and Dumber, the movie,
right.
Saw that I was singing that song live in the show, just for the live shows, and they wanted us to record it. So that was just something that happened. It wasn't a conscious thing. And as far as me doing leads, that happened on our fourth record, and yeah, I think that was more of a conscious effort, just to present the listener with a different sound.
Well, it really worked out, and you stole my next question, because I'm a huge Dumb and Dumber fan. I can't say that without laughing, but it's the Citizen Kane of stupid comedy. I love it. Tell me, I was going to ask if any of your stuff had been in movie soundtracks, and then I was researching, and I was like, of course, Dumb and Dumber. Yes, I'd totally forgotten Ballad of Peter Pumpkinhead. Tell me about the experience of working. I mean, who would have predicted one of the directors, the Fraleys, would go on to win Best Picture a couple decades later? But Green Book, but Dumb and Dumber. Just talk about the experience of that. Did they show you any footage of Jim Carrey and Jeff Daniels? Had you already been working on the song separately, or how did that come together?
Well, I had been singing the song Peter Pumpkinhead in our live shows for a while, and it was really just a live show thing, an opportunity for me to get out front and center and just to provide a little bit of musical color, just a little bit of change to the show, right? Change things up a bit. And the people who were putting Dumb and Dumber together approached us and asked us if we would record it for their movie. We didn't know anything about it. Well, we knew it was a Jim Carrey movie, but we didn't know anything about the movie. but we said sure, sure, why not? And there are actually 2 Crash Test Dummies songs in that movie.
Oh, what's
They
the other
they
one?
used Mm-mm-mm.
Oh, that's in the movie too. Okay.
Yeah, it's in the movie as well. So yeah, they just asked us to record it, and so we did. It really wasn't anything too there was no big celebrity sightings or anything like that. It was just very much a business transaction. But it was fun. It was fun, and it turned out to be quite a hit, especially in Canada.
Oh yeah. Well, hey, I don't mean to tangent on this too much, but I mean, Dumb and Dumber is of utmost importance. Do you know what scenes they appear in? When does it make its appearance in the movie?
Okay. Peter Pumpkinhead appears when they're in a diner, I think, and it's on the jukebox. Like I've only seen it once when it first came out, so this is a while ago.
Is that where they hit the guy with the salt shaker?
Oh, I don't remember, but I know they're in a diner, and I think one of them is eating a hamburger. I can't remember. Yeah, and then it's when they're traveling and they get out of their vehicle and they're arguing, and I think that's when one of them walks away in a huff, and there's like wheat fields or something.
Yes.
Sorry, it's been about 30 years since I've seen it.
No, you're totally right. It's all coming back to me. They fight and he walks off, and then he comes, and then Jim Carrey comes back on like a little scooter.
Yes, that's it. I think that's it.
You want to go to Aspen? All right, cool. Well, thank you for doing that deep dive. I wasn't expecting to go there. And you've been really generous with your time. We won't keep you forever, but I mean, of all those other later albums, I mean, for instance, let's say there's someone listening to this that, of course, knew Ghost That Haunts Me, and of course picked up God Shuffled His Feet. I mean, everyone had that. Maybe A Worm's Life. Maybe they were huge fans back then. But of your later stuff, let's say the non as mainstream stuff, is there any album you would tell them, nudge them to go pick up and say like, hey, if you're coming out to our show here at City Winery, what should you pick up and listen to of the later stuff?
I can tell you without even hesitating to get Ooh La La. Now that's the last recording that we did about 12 years ago. And it's a beautiful record. I can just say that without hesitation. It's a beautiful record.
And there's a song "And It's Beautiful" on it, so that's fitting.
Yeah, exactly. And we do 1 or 2 songs from that record. And one of them, I can tell you that, well, last night when we played at Daryl's house, we had there were 4 people in the front row crying. So we're going to make you cry.
Wow. Make you cry.
Make you cry songs.
That's fantastic. All right. Very cool. Anything else you want to say before we hop off here? I mean, everybody, you have to come check it out. It's at City Winery on March 15th. So coming up really soon next week. So you better get your tickets soon. But speak directly to the listeners. Come on out, guys. Why should they come? Washington,
D.C. Yes. Come down to the City Winery in D.C. because City Winery always treats us very well. It's a great place to see a show, and it's a great place to be a musician, to play a show, because everything's very consistent and professional, and it always sounds good. So yeah, we're very excited about the upcoming show. So yes, come see us.
Awesome. Again, it's Ellen Reid of Crash Test Dummies coming to City Winery in Washington, D.C. on March 15th. So get your tickets now. Hey, this was a blast. Thanks so much for doing this.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Thanks so much for joining us on Beyond the Fame with Jason Fraley. Remember to hit the subscribe button and give us a 5-star rating if you like what you hear. We'll see you next time. I wanted to take a second to tell you about an app I really enjoy. Living in the DC area is great, and Podcast DC gathers all of the local shows that I like all in one local app. Health, sports, local news, politics, and so much more. Podcast DC is the new local app with hundreds of DC area podcasts to choose from. I can earn exciting rewards just for listening and share the podcasts I love instantly. Available in the App Store or in Google Play, listen local with Podcast DC.